Hello, I'm the Badger Reborn, and today I'm going to discuss 6 characters in the Wheel of Time books that are the most killable and the most cuttable for the TV show. I'm a huge fan of the Wheel of Time books, and of course the story is driven by its amazing characters. As we know, TV shows have to make changes, for various reasons. One of these is killing characters off at different points than the book killed them. Another is cutting characters entirely. If a character is killable, that means that I think their main story is important to the narrative. However, they don't need to stay all the way to the end of their story, or if they're alive at the end, it would be okay if they had died. This could be characters who ended a little flat, or who had a great opportunity for an impactful death scene, or perhaps everyone just hates them. I think my very first one is going to surprise you. A cuttable character is very different. They are someone who doesn't really serve a purpose in the narrative. Now, to be clear, I think Robert Jordan crafted every character with care, and they all have a place in his story. However, that story isn't going to be exactly what we get on screen, and that opens the door for improvement in some areas. Removing superfluous characters is one of those areas, plus it will just be necessary to shorten the story. I'll go through 3 characters for each type of change, and explain why I think they could fit. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Which characters would you cut or kill? Don't even think about mentioning you-know-who. This video contains spoilers for all books from The Eye of the World through A Memory of Light, including New Spring. That's the whole series. So if you haven't read the books, you should keep listening to this video so you get incomplete and tension-breaking spoilers about many characters, then continue reading the series with less interest than you had before. Go ahead and give this video a like to help it be more visible to other Wheel of Time fans. I make Wheel of Time content including videos about the books and the TV show, so click the subscribe button for more. I'll start off with a killable character, Moraine Damodred. I think the series would be greatly improved if the story just started with Lan coming to the Two Rivers and taking the boys out of the village. No reason to introduce a woman to the picture. No, I'm totally kidding. However, my pick is actually Moraine, but later on. After Moraine tackles Lanfear through the Finn Arch, her story feels complete. She has recently remembered how to control Sidar, she has successfully taught Rand enough of politics that he can take control of Cairhien and look good doing it, and she takes out a major Forsaken who was literally killing Rand. What an amazing death scene that was, with Lanfear's strength increased by the Andral, killing Rand, who was too weak to use any of the deadly weaves against her, and Moraine comes out of nowhere to do what she had known she would have to do for a long time. She's then gone for a long time, leaving a big hole in Rand's life, and causing him a lot of emotional anguish. Now, I'll certainly say that the scene where she comes into Marilor and Rand sees her is pretty emotional, and having her at Shayol Ghul feels very right. Rand ultimately only trusted 2 channelers throughout the entire story to bring with him, which is ironic since another is having his babies and another will soon, but they are the 2 he trusts the most. Plus, he couldn't exactly choose between Elaine and Aviendha to bring to Shayol Ghul. Additionally, the Tower of Genjai section certainly has fun elements, particularly Mat's sacrifice and the creepiness of the Finn. However, what does Moraine do? She has a very unexpected and, in my opinion, a bit weird romance with Tom. I think a lot of readers would agree with me on that one. She gives Rand advice that he doesn't listen to, which is, classic, but a little bit odd that Zin Rand would ignore her advice. And then she goes to Shayol Ghul and lays on the floor. That's basically it. If I was going to keep her, you couldn't stop me from giving her a joyful reunion with Swan, where they bask in the accomplishment of having successfully gotten Rand and most of the world to the last battle unscathed. Well, not destroyed anyway. So I don't think these elements are crucial. I think Moraine could just die when she fights Lanfear, and the story would be fine, perhaps even improved. At the very least, it wouldn't lower the stakes of death by overturning a major character death. Imagine, for instance, Game of Thrones spoiler coming up, if in Game of Thrones, Ned Stark could come back to life in Season 6. Now, that might have been something that D&D would have written, but it wouldn't have been very well received by most fans. Certainly not by me. This obviously opens up a whole can of questions, if it were to happen, such as what happens to Lanfear, do Mat and the group still go into the Tower of Genjai, and who goes to Shayol Ghul with Rand and Nynaeve? This isn't a full rewrite, so I'm not going to attempt in-depth answers to those questions, but I think there are built-in answers. For instance, Lanfear just dies. Or she dies and is brought back by the Dark One. As for the Tower of Genjai scene, it could still exist, but they just have to get something else from the Finns, or even a different person. The woman who goes with Rand is the easiest. Olivia is a built-in perfect option, since she's supposed to help Rand die. So what do you think? Is Moraine killable? Now, I'll switch over to a character that is cuttable. The first I'll mention is actually a multiple character cut, which was suggested by one of my Patreon supporters in Discord, Dex. The Band of the Red Hand has a lot of characters in its leadership, and really doesn't need all of them. I think they could trim it down to just Vannon, Talmanis, and one other character, such as Dayryd or Nelician. This third character, whichever it was, would be killed by the Golem in Ibudar. Except for Vannon and Talmanis, the characters get very little screen time in the books, so cutting some for a TV show is almost definitely what will happen. This one is so obviously a good idea that I don't even want to spend too much time on it, but it's a good example to start out with. A bigger character cut that I think could make sense is Slayer, aka Luke, aka Isom. That might sound a little crazy right off the bat, but hear me out. Name one thing, just one, that Slayer successfully did. I'll wait, because I don't think there is anything. His role in the story is basically to be Perrin's nemesis, because Perrin doesn't have much to do. However, he's absent from Perrin's story for a while, as he unsuccessfully tries to assassinate Padan Fain, and maybe Rand, and do some other random stuff. Slayer's powers make him extremely overpowered, since he can step into Tel'aran'rhiod, leaving the real world, then move to any place in Tel'aran'rhiod, then step back out into the real world, into that new place. He could have murdered any of the Ta'veren 50 times over in their sleep. His last fight with Perrin is definitely exciting, and is a great set of scenes. It has potential to be really great in the TV show. However, for the rest of the story, he's essentially a big distraction, and I don't really believe that will be compelling, especially to new viewers. Even his big fight with Perrin is something that I view as an odd distraction for Perrin from participating in the last battle, especially since, once it concludes, he has to do other stuff, such as killing Lanfear. His big nemesis essentially becomes not his final nemesis. So I think the story would be greatly improved by cutting Slayer. In his place, I think an easy change would be to have Perrin consistently interact with Lanfear or Demon Dread or another Forsaken in Tel'aran'rhiod, and have that final battle facing them instead of facing Slayer. It would actually strengthen the plot of either of those Forsaken, as well as keeping a main part of Perrin's action and power growth intact. For instance, rather than Perrin running into Lanfear basically out of nowhere near the end and killing her somewhat randomly, Perrin could instead spend several books learning from her in Tel'aran'rhiod while being tricked by her as she undermines other Forsaken. Then he could realize that she's trying to kill Rand too, and they have an epic battle, resulting in Perrin ultimately killing her. Ultimately, since Slayer is both overpowered and not impactful on the plot, I think he could be cut with relatively little impact to the story, and that cut could be used to help strengthen the story by strengthening other more important characters. Cutting an established character has to be done for a reason, and I think these are good reasons. Now let's switch back to another killable character, which may not be as controversial as Moraine. This one somewhat breaks my previous change, so it might have to be done one or the other, but I think that killing Lanfear would be a good idea. Now, I know that she already gets killed twice, but I mean that Lanfear needs to die, Sindain needs to not exist, and then Lanfear needs to not return. But especially, Sindain needs to not exist. As I mentioned before when talking about Moraine, the climactic battle where Moraine pushes Lanfear through the arch is so powerful. When Sindain comes back, it is both confusing and kind of a letdown. Moraine's sacrifice seems to be basically for naught, since Lanfear is able to come back. Additionally, although she isn't as beautiful as before, she is still extremely attractive. Also, she's not quite as strong as she was in the Power before, but almost quite as strong. So what are the differences that it's made? I think the Sindain arc is very weak. Capital V. Since it goes almost nowhere and feels very pointless. She doesn't act any differently from how Lanfear already acted. She isn't actually controlled by Moraine to any great degree, and she's killed by Perrin, who she has really no prior relationship with in the story. I think there are two ways that this could be improved. Either just have Lanfear die when Moraine tackles her through the arch. How convenient. Both Moraine and Lanfear just die together here, as it seems they do. And this would be a great mind-blowing moment, for new readers especially, but also for us established fans. Or, Matt and Tom and Noel and Moraine could kill Lanfear when they go into the Tower of Genjai. Perhaps there could even be a new part where, in order to rescue Moraine, they have to also release Lanfear, and Moraine instead kills both herself and Lanfear at that time. That may be a bad plot, I can see a big downside to it, but it would be at least better than having Sindain pointlessly hanging around. Like, seriously, what is one thing that Sindain does? Confuses the other Chosen as to who she is, which leads nowhere. Tries to kill Rand, and fails. Tries to control Perrin, and fails. Lanfear's story is one big long string of failures. Similar to Ishamael, by the way. But she doesn't need another string of Sindain failures, too. Lanfear is at least an interesting character, whereas Sindain, not so much. One other potential ending that would be more satisfying for Lanfear is for her to be killed by Elaine, Avienda, or Min, since she hates them for being with Rand. Elaine may be especially poignant since Lanfear has the complex about blonde-haired women due to losing LTT to that pale-haired milksop Iliana son here. I feel like there's really almost nothing I even need to say further about this death. I'm curious if there is anyone who actually likes the Sindain storyline. Let me know in the comments if you do. Also, if you're enjoying this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more Wheel of Time videos. I've got one more character cut, and I think this is a really interesting one. As soon as rumors of a Watch show started, speculation started that at least one Forsaken would be cut, and debates about which one it should be have been nearly constant. It's often regarded as a given due to how many Forsaken there are, and how some seem to be very similar to others, and they aren't really adding much, feel a bit like replaceable generic villains. This is especially true of the jealousy duo, Damodred and Samael. Bilal dies so fast that he barely has any character. Robin has a bit more character, and an interesting plot, I think, with his compulsion of Morghese, and his pretty interesting battle with Rand, which Nynaeve and Moghedien help with, so I think he should stay how he is. A popular suggestion is cutting Taim and just making Damodred to be in his place, the Timondred theory. I know this was how Robert Jordan originally planned it, with Damodred disguising himself as Taim, but I don't care. I hate this. It's the worst. I may or may not have ranked Taim as the best villain in the Wheel of Time, because he's so unique and fun. A regular channeler who styled himself as the Dragon Reborn was found, trained, and converted to evil by Damodred, and then has the guts to walk right up to Rand and steal channelers right from under his nose for the shadow. The fact that he's not Damodred is why it's believable that Rand would be fooled by him. Plus, he gives Rand a seal to the Dark One's prison. That's a huge reason that Rand trusts him. Anyway, Timondred aside, I think Damodred should also stay as he is, but with more of the Shara story shown. It could be a fascinating parallel to Rand's story, as Damodred's life in general is, much to his chagrin. The Forsaken that I think should be cut, then, is either Samael or Bilal. I don't particularly care which one, because I think they are so replaceable. Samael is jealous of Lews Therin, while Bilal is good at manipulating, supposedly. So, what if, for instance, Samael was cut, and Bilal flees from the Stone of Tyr to take up residence in Ilion instead? Then we'd get a much more fleshed out story of him. He'd be a villain for a long time, and could really become a sinister baddie as he infects 2 cities, and Rand almost gets killed by him before Moraine shows up. That would be kind of an interesting parallel too, because the way I just described it, Bilal would flee the Stone of Tyr, then Rand would turn and start fighting Ishamael, killing him. Later on, when Rand is fighting Bilal, Moraine, Ishamael, comes again, but this time helps Rand and kills Bilal. We really don't need both Samael and Bilal, who have very similar plots. Bad guy who's a good general, fights Rand, gets killed, the end. But one of them doing multiple seasons worth of bad guying would be a lot better. Alternatively, both could be cut, and it could be only Ishamael and Lanfear in the Stone of Tyr. We know Lanfear was helping with the plot. And then could be Damodred or Graendal, who is guiding Iliana from the shadows. But I'm not sure that works quite as well. So let's get one more killable character. I'm going to go with Andral. I know that he's a favorite of some people, but he's my least favorite character in the entire series. I may make a video about this in the future, but to make a long story short, he's a totally overpowered Gary Stu type character who comes out of nowhere to be a main character, and really lacks the flaws of Robert Jordan characters. Those flaws are really the hallmark of how Jordan writes characters, and Andral just doesn't really have any of it. He was really a creation of Brandon Sanderson, and while I don't fault Sanderson for easing himself into the world and establishing it as partly his own by having a character that he could really feel was his, I don't think he matched well with the type of characters that Robert Jordan centered his world around. Andral is basically Galad if Galad was well-liked and powerfully magical and had a fake weakness. So why don't I have Andral as just a cut? I thought about it, but I think that as a tribute to Brandon and all he did for the Wheel of Time, Andral should be left in. However, a minor role would be better, maybe helping free Logain and then dying in the attempt. This way, more of a spotlight can go to Logain, which we already know is going to happen anyway, especially since he's a really interesting character. And Logain, as we know, is going to be prominent in the early parts of the show. It makes sense for him to be prominent near the end, too. This also allows for less focus to be taken from the main characters that we've spent seasons getting to know and caring about by the time that we get to the last battle and the lead up to it. Andral can go out in a blaze of glory, maybe dumping lava on both himself and some dreadlords or something, but ultimately I want his arc and time in the story to be short. I think the story would be better for it. To recap, I think Bilal or Samael, some of the Band of the Red Hand, and Slayer are character cuts that the show could and maybe should make. Moraine, Sindane, and Andral are deaths that could happen, or deaths that could happen earlier than they do in the books. All these changes are not random. Instead, they improve the story in one or several ways, as any changes should. Make sure to leave a comment or two below with your thoughts on these cuts and deaths. I want to know, number 1, which character would you cut? Number 2, which character would you kill? And number 3, which of my cut or kill characters do you agree or disagree with, and why? That wraps up this video, though there are so many more potential changes that I'm sure I'll have more of the like. Check out some of my other videos too if you haven't seen them, such as my theory about the Dark One doesn't exist, or speculation as to whether the TV show will fail miserably, as some other fantasy adaptations have. Make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel, and consider joining my Patreon. My patrons are an amazing community, whose support I really cherish. If you can't join, make sure to leave a comment and like. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.